Okay, so I was in the middle of filming a different video, and that video will probably be up on YouTube by now. And that's about this little selector horn gramophone I recently purchased. Now, as it's all in pieces on the workbench, I thought it would be a good opportunity just to compare briefly this machine against some of the fake gramophones I have, the ones which look like old horn gramophones which aren't. So this is not going to be highly comprehensive. I only have this machine on the bench. This machine is actually fairly typical of the sort of cheap Swiss made or made with Swiss parts machines which were around, you know, around 1910, 1920, something like that. Anyway, the first thing, well, let's first of all grab a fake machine. Now I picked this one here. Now this is actually octagonal in shape. Now that is a clue in its own right. Real machines were never octagonal. They were always square, really, square or maybe slightly rectangular. And in fact, the motor on this, which is a Garrard 30 clone, is actually more like sort of late 1920s, early 1930s. I think they made this motor for a really quite a long time, but certainly not period to the age of the, well, to the era that the machine is supposedly dating from. This is the sort of motor you would have found in a much later machine. Also worth noting, while we've got the two machines like so, is that the speed control. The speed control on the real one is this little knob here. This actually activates on this lever here. If that's in camera shot, hopefully it is. You see the lever that's there. And the later machines have this sort of control here, or sort of the fake machines have this sort of control here, which is typical of the later portable machines. If I put the platter back on, you can also see that the brake activates inside the platter. That's a later feature. The brake on this one here actually acts on the outside of the platter. If I just grab the platter, no motor in it, so if I just rest it sort of in roughly the right place there, you can see that it would act on the outside of the rim and not on the inside. Something else that you can also probably see is that the rim of these platters is curved. This is very much like a portable gramophone of the late 1920s, early 1930s, or even later than, you know, right up until they stopped making portable gramophones, whereas the rim of this one is flat. And another thing about the platter, early platters, at least on these sorts of machines, had this cast iron gridded effect underneath there, which you can sometimes see from the top. I mean, it's not necessarily easy to see, but you should be able to see. And it is amazing how much, even with the motor fitted, it's amazing how much you can actually see under a platter with like the torch from a phone, a cell phone or a smartphone. This one here, this is much more, this is basically a copy of a much later portable platter, and it's you can see also that the quality is just not there. It's a lot flimsier. These are not real gramophone parts. I did do another video talking about whether these fake machines actually contained real gramophone parts, but they don't. These ones don't. These are completely brand new. This machine, you know, could be as little as, you know, 2 or 3 years old in its entirety. This machine here is, as I say, more like 110 years old. Let's just grab a different machine. Now this is a more typical square machine, fake square machine, and they're often in this sort of very sort of plum coloured wood. So it's just cheap wood that's been stained up to look sort of like mahogany. Now this one does actually have a motor which is you know, more similar to the real one, and we've still got this much later style of control here. and the brake as well inside rather than outside. So again, sort of telltale signs that this is fake and this is real. Now if I put this back on the bench and actually maybe take a few things out from inside. So we've got the winding handle, and this is a fairly typical fake winding handle. It's got this very sort of big black wooden handle on it. Sometimes they're actually unfinished at the end, so you can just see plain wood at the end. The real ones, I mean, they vary a lot, but quite often, like this, with this sort of style of handle, quite often they have a sort of slotted end there on the early ones. This screw fitting was actually a sort of slightly later design feature. So it's quite noticeable there, the sort of differences. You know, that doesn't really look very old because it's not. Other things worth looking at, we could do, let's do the back bracket and the sound box. In fact, we take that sound box out as well. Now, the sound boxes on these fake machines are almost inevitably or invariably have this sort of style of box here, and I've done a whole video on why they have this style of box, and they're often marked His Master's Voice. I mean, this one might be, maybe put it on this camera here. These are nothing to do with HMV. HMV did not make sound boxes like this. In fact, a company called Thorins made sound boxes that looked like this. Again, they date from the late 1920s, early 1930s. They're not correct for this style of machine. In fact, the if I grab the actual tone arm here, sound box that came with this is actually this little selector sound box here, and there are a whole load of other sound boxes which might be suitable, or you might find on an old machine. Quite typically, they'll have this mica. Looks like glass, but it's not. It's mica. It's a mineral, sort of transparent sheet, and they often have sort of springs and stuff down here. These sound boxes, they have metal. They're basically all metal, and they have no springs or anything at the bottom. So yeah, so that's a fake one, and that's a real one. And if we have a look at the tone arm and back bracket, I mean, again, very similar in design. I mean, this one here, I've not done anything to this at all. I don't know when anybody last serviced this. It's a bit stiff. But yeah, it's a nice heavy nice heavy casting. So this bit here, I don't know what that's made out of. I mean, let's try a magnet on it. Yeah, so that's that on this one is cast iron. It could be made out of other materials, but it's cast iron. That's cast iron as well. That I think is probably brass. And I think the sound box on this one happens to be cast iron as well, although again, it could be made out of other materials. One of the sort of notable features of the fakes, and they can vary. Sometimes I have this arrangement like this gooseneck arrangement, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just have some other sort of joint. But these are actually made out of brass. But very telling, they have this very standardized, I'll put it on this camera here, aluminium bracket. If you see a horn gramophone with this style of bracket, it's going to be fake, really. I mean, maybe these are copied off real gramophones. Maybe there are genuine ones with this style of bracket, but it's a real telltale sign. This sort of bright silver, aluminium silver finish back bracket, and this sort of long screw here, very poorly made. I mean, it's just not great at all. So yeah, so that's fake. This top one here is real. Okay, so I think it's probably worth just also talking about the horns, which is going to be a challenge on this bench here, but let's give it a go. Let's put a few things away. I'll pull one of these out of the box. That's a horn bracket for a fake machine. Now the horns that you'll usually see on fake machines will be these sort of brass horns. I mean, sometimes they've got an embossed pattern, sometimes they don't, and the back there'll be a sort of adapter like that on the back, very hard sort of angle there, and the actual horn itself, I've got a tape measure to hand. So that's about 15.5 inches or about 40 centimeters. It's quite small, really. I mean, it may sound like quite a big horn, but it's actually quite small compared to the real thing. Here's another one here. In fact, let's swap this one over. Again, this bracket will go on the back like so. That's in camera shot. It's very difficult to keep everything in camera shot. This bench really isn't big enough, but that will go on like that. In fact, you can see where one's been fitted on it for quite some time, and that's the original brass underneath. So I think a lot of people would think, well, that's really what a gramophone horn should look like, brass. But let's measure that one. That again is what, 16, maybe 16.5 inches. It's not particularly big really as gramophone horns go, and it's brass, and brass really wasn't the material that was used. Now, indeed, there were brass gramophone horns, most certainly, but on these sort of cheapy Swiss-made gramophones, this is more typical of the sort of horn that you're likely to see. Now, this is a blue one. This is actually made out of one single piece that's been folded round and joined at a seam. I'll show you another one in a minute that's made out of petals like the fake ones, and you can see there's a much more substantial bracket on the back. Again, hopefully that's in camera shot there. That's much more typical of the sort of bracket that should be there, or elbow as I think they're called. Now if I move this around like so, careful with this, but it's rusty, and indeed it's rusty for a reason. It's made out of some sort of ferrous metal, so it's steel, I think, of some description. I think it might have been described as tin plate, but it's basically, it's magnetic, or a magnet will stick to it, and therefore they do rust, and I'll show you one that's rusted in a minute. And I was going to measure it. That's what I was going to do. I was going to measure it, and this one is actually more like 18 inches, and this is actually a relatively small horn. They came quite a lot bigger than this, and when you start looking at real horn machines versus the fakes, you realise that the horns on the fakes just are a bit small, especially for the bass units. The proportions just aren't right. But if you've never seen anything else, you might think it's right. So that is actually the horn that belongs to that machine, or the machine I showed at the beginning of the video. This horn here is one that I happened to pick up. I have shown this in a few other videos. This is rusty. Whether I'm ever going to be able to get this one going again, I don't know. I mean, there literally are rusted holes, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge. But if we take the tape measure, that's 18 inches. Now, 18 inches isn't the magic figure, but just to let you know, really, that the small brass horns, really, they're not right. And if you see a machine with a small brass horn, like one of these, which I think was only about 15 inches. Okay, what's 16.5 inches. Yes, that's not that much smaller. It's a bit smaller, but not that much smaller. It's not right. And also, although horns were often decorated, they were painted, or they you know, have flowers and stuff on. And that blue one is actually embossed in a pattern. This sort of embossing here, this is more of a modern approach. This is not the sort of embossing that it would have had. So these two are definitely fakes. I mean, I bought them as fakes, but they're definitely fakes. And I say this one actually is that bit smaller as well. Yeah, it's about 15.5. Okay, so that's a few little pointers or comparisons between a real machine and the sort of typical fakes. If you've enjoyed this video, then how about giving me a like? But also, if you've got any comments or questions, or you want to add any more information, then please let me know also. Okay, so hopefully that's been a bit helpful. And if you've enjoyed this video, then you might like this one too. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.